This week's Torah reading is Mishpatim. Mishpatim means laws, statutes, the things that act as the guide rails for our civilization. Last week, we learned all about the revelation at Mount Sinai, where some 1.5 million people gathered around the base of a small mountain and heard the word of God, the theophany that changed the course of not only their lives, but of all of the lives that have been born and died since Mount Sinai, 3,500 years ago. But it's not only those 10 commandments, Asara Devarim, that were given at Mount Sinai, but all of the commandments that we're reading in this week's Torah reading as well. Those too were given at Mount Sinai, says Rashi, as well as a number of the sages. They say there's no break, there's no gap between the 10 commandments and the outlaying of definition of what it means to not lie, not steal, not covet, not murder. Because those things are so tightly woven and so tersely placed that it requires so much more explanation of what they mean. So we have this week's Torah reading where God explains in greater detail how we're supposed to observe those commandments and many others as well. All of this week's Torah reading is part of the revelation at Mount Sinai. And sandwiched in between these two stories, these two revelatory events that took place at the same place and basically the same time, is God inserts in between the creation, how to make a mizbeach, that if we're to create an altar where sacrifices are to be offered to God, they're to be made from hewn stone. And then we go right back to the Mishpatim, all the laws, the minutiae of how justice is to be meted out. What Rambam, Maimonides, teaches and extrapolates from this sandwiched piece of information between those two revelations is that when you build the temple, King Solomon's temple, and several hundred years from now, when the story takes place, that is, you would also fashion a Lishkat Hagazit, a chamber of hewn stone where the Sanhedrin would meet and discuss and adjudicate law to create a civil society that would be guided by justice always. So here you have the place where the sacrifices were altered, and a deliberate place where the Sanhedrin would meet. And we know where it was, because this has been actually dug up in modern Israel. We know where the chamber of hewn stone was, where the Sanhedrin met, that the two of them are united as a single entity, that we're supposed to pray, we're supposed to have fidelity to God, we're supposed to have connection to God, to receive as well as ask and thank. But there's no such thing as having a relationship with God that is devoid of justice, that the two are hand in glove. The two need to be met as one, which is why the Sanhedrin had to be next to the Mizbeach. There's no atoning for sin unless there is justice. A justice means making sure that every person is treated equally before the law. God doesn't want our prayers if we're acting inappropriately, if we're acting in a sinful manner, but rather justice and fidelity to God are one for us. As Jews, they are inseparable, which is why we have the 10 Commandments, the laws about how to construct an altar, a temple, and then go back to the minutiae of understanding how to make sure that justice is maintained among our people. This is our task, to be faithful to God and to be honest and faithful with one another. Shabbat Shalom.